So, I think everyone here is probably fairly well acquainted with AutoTune, general pitch correction, all that good stuff. So, all right. So I guess just to kind of dive in here, so I don't think we need to go over a ton of like super basics. Is when we're talking about somebody's voice. You're on. Somebody here? Is it someone here? Hey. We have the actual tone part, and then we have the aspiration. And that's not like it has dreams and goals. That's like the actual airy part of the voice. You have the airy component of the voice, and you have the actual tone part of the voice. If we looked at that, let's say in like under like an EQ of some sort, what it'll probably look like is
I felt it in my soul, man. I felt it.
Right up around 3K or so. That's about where any amount of tone and harmonics is normally going to stop, and then the stuff above it, what we think of as like the clarity, the S's, the T's, all of that stuff. There's no pitch to that. S doesn't have a note. But if I go do, that's going to be a note that's going to be way down. You know, that's going to be down here is where that spike's going to be happening. So the way that pitch correction works, what's kind of cool, is that they figured out how to kind of separate the voice into those two components. The components of just the breathy, airy stuff at the top, and then the actual pitch components down at the bottom, okay? Because when we start just pitch shifting, we start shifting the whole vocal up and down. You know what that sounds like? It sounds like you literally just took a pitch shifter on it. So let's say, listen to this.
So I gave you the message.
Okay, and then let's say we take, and if, you know, we all know what this sounds like, you just pitch shift it and everything moves.
So I gave you the message.
Okay, if you listen to S's along with the pitch of the voice just shifted, so you get that really weird voice. You go the other way, you get a screw vocal. That's actually one of the defining things. Actually, let me say this. That's actually one of the defining parts of a screw vocal. Is that the top end of the voice, the S's, the T's, all of that stuff shifts with the main pitch. That's what makes it a screw vocal. Okay, so to kind of demonstrate, let's say it's kind of funny because Marcus, I don't think would ever do this, but
I felt it in my soul, man. I felt it. You wanted the delivery.
Okay, so you're like, okay, so that kind of sounds like a classic screw vocal. Well, even here in Pro Tools, we go up into pitch shift. Let's grab a time shift plugin. We can, let me see if I put you on monophonic. There we go. Okay. There, we can now change the pitch, and then we have this thing called the formants. And this is actually when we talk about specifically about what isn't shifted. It's what we call the formants. That top end stuff, the S's, the T's, all of that. Those are the formants in the voice. Okay. So what this will allow me to do is I could shift the pitch elements of his voice down 5, but then leave his formants, the top end of the voice alone, basically. So let's listen to what that sounds like.
I felt it in my soul, man. I felt it. You wanted the delivery.
Okay, so that sounds pretty weird. You see, you end up with this kind of this nasal sound, but that's because the top end, the airy part of the voice, actually stayed there, but the pitch part moved. Now, granted, we just moved them 5 steps apart. That's a lot. So that sounds really, really weird. But that being said, that actually is kind of a cool way that you can, just a side note, get away if you want to do like an octave down, like screw vocal, like a super deep thing, but have some intelligibility left.
I felt it in my soul, man. I felt it. You wanted the delivery.
So that's actually, so anyways, that's just kind of a side note thing. If you ever need that. Okay, so we have these two parts of the voice. Okay, so with that in mind, let's actually take a look at a vocal, and here we use AutoTune Live, and we use Wavestream, okay, for our hand tuning. So that's what we use for our pitch correction duty. So here's a copy of AutoTune Live, okay. So the thing about this is this actually is true AutoTune. It works automatically, okay. We talk about hand tuning. That's not AutoTune. That's hand tuning because we're actually going through by hand. There's nothing automatic about that process. I mean, some stuff maybe, but in general, no. That's kind of how we differentiate between the two. Okay, so as we look at AutoTune here, we got a whole bunch of different knobs. There's only a couple of these that you got to pay big attention to, okay? And there's some, if you have AutoTune 7, Evo, Pro, you're going to find a lot of these same names and controls on them. On the newer versions, there's a Flex Tune. We prefer using AutoTune Live, first off, because it doesn't incur any latency, so an artist can use it real time in the headphones, both for pitch guidance or for tracking for effect, which is really worthwhile, especially if someone is trying to, let's say, rap through AutoTune with that as the effect. If it doesn't sound right, hop back on the mic, perform it again. No, like, fixing it later. Normally that causes lots of problems. The other reason that we use AutoTune Live is it's built off of the AutoTune 5 engine, and AutoTune 5 is the sound of AutoTune. Anytime that anybody thinks of like, oh, I want that AutoTune sound, it's AutoTune 5 is the sound. That was the one that they nailed it, and they actually kind of lost some of that edge that people really liked about it in 7 and Evo, which is why in AutoTune Pro that they just released, they actually have a setting to flip it back to that same engine. Because that's actually the sound, and there are actually people and mix engineers that have actually kept around AutoTune 5 because the other ones just didn't sound right when they wanted to use it as an effect. So this is built off it and has the same sound. So that's one of the reasons that we also use this as well. And that doesn't mean that we only use it for effect. We actually use it more often than not actually for singing. But so let's kind of dive into this real quick. So the first thing that you're going to want to take a look at when you pull it up is you got to look at what source are you feeding it, okay? So by default, it's going to pull up in soprano. You're probably never ever going to use this as a soprano. Soprano is very high female vocal, very high, okay? Like Mariah Carey, like whistle tones and doing stuff like that. If you're working on classical, you probably shouldn't be using AutoTune. You should probably be doing hand tuning. But that being said, soprano is going to be a really high vocal. 95% of the vocals that you're ever going to work on are going to be alto and tenor. That's lower female and typical mid-range to higher range male. Like this, that's going to be what you're using. It's going to be in this whole section of the keyboard right here. It's going to be where the notes are focused. You do have low male, which is if someone is like a bass, like, you know, in like a barbershop quartet, and you have the one guy that like real huge chest cavity that that's going to be down here. Okay. Yeah, it's not. I've never met a woman that can sing that low, so I don't consider this sexist. Then you've got instrument. This is just kind of a general algorithm. That's good for let's see, tuning like individual instruments, violins, saxophones, things like that. Can be really nice. You can also a lot of times get away with the alto tenor. The difference in using instrument, though, is that it's less aggressive in how it separates the tone. Because those instruments will have higher harmonics in that top end where the formants of the voice are, so it modifies it a little differently. That sounds better for instruments than if it was just for a vocalist. But a lot of times you can still use alto tenor pretty reliably. I mean, hell, if you're recording an alto sax, that's the range and the timbre of the instrument, okay? So that's going to work pretty well. Okay, so and then you've got bass instrument, and you can use that for tuning like bass guitars, stuff like that, which is really, really useful. That algorithm's always been a little buggy. So if you're using it and you like it, I recommend that you print it because it may start crashing your DAW. Just to this day, they still haven't fixed. So just use that carefully, the bass instrument. Anyways, so okay. So we need to set our source type. So in this case, this is kind of a singing type verse thing here. Let's just kind of give a quick listen to this.
If there were prizes for being me, I'd win every category and be inducted in the... I just think you'd be a better you, so go on, do what you do, be a baller shot. So don't you even worry, you're writing your story, you're so much farther than where you came. You are good enough, you're a winner and a champ, so go get 'em, man.
Okay. So that definitely would be a tenor. There's definitely a male in the upper range. So this is definitely the algorithm that we want. Okay. So, like I said, like 95% of the time, or if you have any doubt, just put it on alto tenor. Like you're gonna do well. Okay. So tracking. this is a really cool control, and what this is going to do is that in watching the pitch of what's coming in, basically relaxed means it's going to act more often, and choosy, it's going to kind of let some stuff go. It's going to take a little bit more time before being like, yeah, that's a note, and then telling it to start adjusting the pitch. So on choosy, it's kind of like, do I want to tune that note? Maybe, maybe not. On relaxed, it's going to just kind of go after everything, okay? What this means in real world terms is typically if you're doing like an AutoTune rapper, you're probably going to want to be more towards the choosy side. Because a lot of times the beginning of their words, you'll want to kind of allow to do their thing, and you don't want them just locked immediately. You want to allow them to kind of hit it and then have it clamp down. So it almost think of it as if it's almost like a slight delay. So it kind of hits and then hits like the main part of the note. Relax is normally going to be better on singers. Starting right in the middle is a really nice place. Once you get working on something, especially if you're recording a vocalist with AutoTune on, I don't recommend playing with this setting a lot. Because if someone is kind of performing into AutoTune and they're hearing it back in the headphones, they kind of get used to how they can kind of push and pull it. It becomes part of their performance. So I don't recommend changing tracking on them, because all of a sudden they'll be like, well, I just sang it like this a minute ago and it kind of sounded like this, and now I hear myself bending into the note more or less. If I'm working on a singer, I'll be honest with you, I normally probably start around here. If I'm a rapper, probably about here. Just, you can kind of do your 2 o'clock, 10 o'clock are really good starting points, I think. Just kind of depend on what you're doing. But most singers are here. If you're on relaxed, you're going to grab more of the scoops and the slides. Choosy is going to let those kind of make their way through. So he's singing, so we're going to kind of put it over to this side. Okay, here's one of the most important things, key. Without getting into like full-on music theory and everything like that, is first thing we need to find is the root note of the song. The note on the piano that everything else in the song kind of bases off of. Because we need to tell AutoTune what are the good notes and what are the bad notes. So what's probably the best way, or what methods do people use to find the key of the song? Anybody have any go-to tried and true things?
Well, since I know how to play piano, sometimes I kind of hum the song and then just match it with the A to B chords.
Absolutely. That's pretty much the way to do it. I would go a step further and say, especially for people that don't play at all, listen more often than not. Okay, I'd say probably 80% of the time, the first note that the bass in the song hits, that's going to be the root note of the song. Okay, almost always. So listen at the beginning of a chord structure. Okay, so boom, and then we're going to go over to the keyboard, we're going to find that note. Hey. And then if you know music theory, you probably want to play the arpeggio. Because that closes us into the second piece of information that we need to know. So, we can see that we have AutoTune here set to E. That's right here. You drop this, and all these drop down, so we're in the key of E. Then you have the scale. Okay, and you can see how here we have the scale, and we have the white bars means that it won't allow the vocalist to hit that note. That note's off limits. If someone hits that note, it's going to push them up or down to whichever one they were closer to on either side, okay? It's like, hey, that's a bad note. I'm not going to let you hit it. If you're unsure, pick minor. Okay. So again, 80% of the music that we're working on, if you're working in any type of, especially hip hop, R&B, or pop, it's almost always going to be minor. Minor just sounds cooler normally. You will see some songs in major, but you see all these things here, okay? Major and minor. Okay, these are what you want right here. Okay, Ling Lung, Scholars, Greek chromatic. Now, granted, all of these are actual scales, and there have been times I've definitely needed them. You get into Arabic tones, that's because they have quarter tones. They use notes that are in between the notes there. You have to have those tuned. And you can do that with AutoTune. we're here with where we adjust the sense and the actual like scientific like pitch note that it hits. But in general, you're going to use major or minor. Personally, this whole list right here, I say leave it in chromatic, don't touch it, okay? What you actually want to do down here is you want to either hit your set major or set minor, okay? Because they know that more often than not, that's what you're using. So here's what happens up here. If I come up here, and I know this song's in E minor now, I hit minor, it popped it down to this real easy. Here's the good notes that you're allowed to hit, okay? But here's the thing. Sometimes there are, in a song, a vocalist, let's say going into a bridge, they may need to actually hit a note that is technically out of key at one specific spot in the song. And if I've done this, I've lost access to all my other notes. So leave it in chromatic and then set minor here. And see, they're here, but if I need to, I can just be like, oh, give them that note back. Or, you know what? Just give them that note back right there on the keyboard in that octave right there. Okay? So it just leaves it a lot more flexible for you. So don't use that. Just hit major or minor from here. If you hit set all, we're in what we call full chromatic. It allows them to hit every note. When we hit minor, we can see that it removed notes from the scale, ones that are grayed out here. And it isn't going to let them hit it. Okay? So that's going to be set in our key. Scale to tune, we'll come back to that here a little bit. Throat length is something that's on it. Don't touch this. I'm sorry, Antares, but that's just a gimmick. It's kind of dumb. You can kind of change the timbre of the voice a little bit, but you can use it as an effect at some points, but don't touch it. Like, that's bad. The important thing here to have checked is formant, the formant correction. Okay, so we were talking just a minute ago about shifting the pitch versus shifting someone's S's and T's, the things in the voice that don't have pitch information in them. When this is off, it shifts everything in the voice, just like you were doing a screw vocal or pitching it up Kendrick style, okay? When you turn this on, it engages and separates them, and the voice just sounds more natural. You don't hear the tuning as much because we shouldn't be hearing our S's pitch up and down, and when formant correction isn't on is when that happens. So let's actually just take a quick listen here.
If there were prizes for being me, I'd win every category and be inducted in the... If there were prizes for being me, I'd win every category and be inducted in the...
Let's flip the formants back on.
If there were prizes for being me, I'd win every category.
Do you hear his C's and K's and his S? They sound much more natural with formant correction on. Listen one more time. I'm going to turn it off and listen for his S's and C's and K's, like his consonant.
If there were prizes for being me, I'd win every category.
Hear that, like you heard the C of category, and he said prizes, that S, but they were kind of dull. I'm gonna flip formants back on. Listen to the same part.
If there were prizes for being me, I'd win every category.
It's just a little bit more natural sounding, and that's really important. We don't want our pitch correction to be messing with our vocals, especially if you worked with the artist for a long time, getting a performance and working on their consonants and their S's. I don't want to put a plugin on that's just going to muck it all up. So formant correction, very, very important, okay? Basically, always have that on. I know you can hear me. Okay, thank you. Okay, so that very important. I really don't see much reason to ever not have that on unless you're trying to do like a very specific effect type thing. Because if we're using this on vocals, we want to hear it. Maybe on some instruments or things like that, but to give you an idea, the formants in a bass guitar, if you're playing an electric bass, that's going to be the string slap. You know, that stuff doesn't have pitch to it. It doesn't matter what note you play on a bass, a string slap or a fret buzz is going to sound the same regardless, right? And that's going to be what your formants are. So it just sounds more natural. All right, so then obviously, and then here's the moneymaker controls, the things that everyone goes to first. We got our retune speed and our humanized speed. On more modern versions of AutoTune, we also have one called Flex Tune. The Flex Tune's kind of cool. One of the reasons that we don't, or at least I don't care about it too much, is because if the point that I start using those controls, I want to go in by hand. Okay, I still don't want that to happen automatically. One of the things to remember about a plugin like AutoTune is that it processes in real time, which is both a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing because you can use it with an artist in real time and get direct feedback for their pitch. Okay. Bad thing is every time you hit play, it's analyzing it and repeating that process. It's pretty consistent, but it's not perfect. If you use it a bunch and use it on a bunch of tracks, especially in a big R&B session, I guarantee you're going to export your track and you're going to listen back to it and be like, what the hell? On that one track, all of a sudden someone sounds like a duck, or something just sounds weird, or it's got stuck on a note or something like that. That happens. And you don't check in, and the artist is like, man, why'd you put that effect on my voice? And you're like, what effect? And they're like, listen to it. Listen to this one backing part right here. Why'd you do that? And it was just AutoTune freaking out. So in general, print your AutoTunes. If you got time and you're like, hey, that sounds good, just print it, be done with it, okay? This is really complicated software and algorithms that are running. It still screws up. It is not perfect. So, anyway, so on retune speed, this is the big one. This is going to be when AutoTune detects a pitch and is like, oh, that pitch needs to go to here. How quickly does it get that pitch there? It's like the attack time on a compressor. When the pitch is off, how quickly does it put it there? So let's slow this down to 400 and let's listen.
If there were prizes for being me, I'd win every category.
Right up here, you can see that that's what AutoTune's actually doing. So we can see that it's taking a little bit to push them either direction.
If there were prizes for being me, I'd win every category and be inducted in the... I just think you'd be a better you, so go on, do what you do.
Okay. That's going to be basically... that. At that speed, like, seriously, just bypass this. Like, it's basically doing nothing. Maybe you could use that on a bass instrument or something like that. You know, something that's like on or something like that. But in general, on vocals, like, maybe you can go as slow as 100.
If there were prizes for being me, I'd win every category and be inducted in the...
So by doing that, if you listen to it now, we can hear that the beginning of his words are still being allowed to he's still bending into them. He's, you know, kind of a little flatter, and then he hits the note, he goes just a little sharp before he evens out, and then AutoTune starts acting because AutoTune's like chasing behind his pitch. So as I pull this up, you'll hear that the fronts of his words start to get more and more tuned.
If there were prizes for being me, I'd win every category and be inducted in the... If there were prizes for being me, I'd win every category and be inducted in the...
Okay, so now we can hear that he's not nearly bending as much, okay, on the beginnings of his notes. But the higher that this retune speed is, the more we're going to start hearing, like, when he's kind of between notes, or there's vibrato at the end of a phrase, or someone maybe scoops into a note and goes a little too high before they come back, and AutoTune's like, oh, well, you were close to this note, and it's acting so fast that it pushes them up to the note and down. You start hearing all those, like, ring sounds, okay?
If there were prizes for being me, I'd win every category.
We got every.
I'd win every category.
We can hear it's actually pushing him up higher than he should be on that note. So typically for like natural vocals, like 20 and a humanize of 50 is probably a good place to start. If I was tracking an artist, I'd probably start around here and adjust as necessary. The humanize function, once AutoTune has kind of achieved the actual note and it's like, okay, cool, you're here. You know, people aren't perfect. We still, once we hit a note, we still kind of that. Maybe we have some vibrato, which is pushing the pitch up and down. How tightly does it hold it? You know, is it going to allow it to be human, or do we want it to be more robotic?
If there were prizes for being me, I'd win every category and be inducted in the...
Especially in the, you can hear that it really like clamped down and held them to that note, and it's starting to sound a little, I mean, the pitch sounds really good, but that doesn't sound as natural.
Category and be inducted in the...
But as I release it, you're like, the pitch isn't as good.
Category and be inducted in the...
So, one of the reasons that I have this up right now is that we can take this and we can hard tune it, but really, anytime you have someone singing, you really need to reach for an actual, either the graphic mode in AutoTune, like I said, or we use Waves Tune. I like the workflow. I think it's faster. I also like having a different texture in my tuning. So the way that this works is you're going to see a lot of the same controls, okay, even if they're called slightly different things. You can see we have a root note, so I'm going to go set this to E. It's again like, holy crap. I'm like, I just want natural minor, regular old minor. Up here, we can see we can set our range, tenor, alto. In Waves Tune, you can basically just leave it on generic. And so what's going to happen with this is it needs to know what it needs to correct first. So you just literally have to just play what you want to correct through at one time. This is the same if using graphical mode in AutoTune. So I'm just going to highlight here, and we're just going to play this through, okay?
If there were prizes for being me, I'd win every category and be inducted in the... I just think it'd be a better you, so go on, do what you do, be a baller shot. So don't you even worry, you're writing your story, you're so much farther than where you came. You are good enough, you're a winner and a champ, so go get 'em, man.
Alright, cool. So all these, all right, there's two things going on here, okay? We've got these yellow squiggles. The yellow squiggles is the exact pitch that was tracked, okay? So you say, like, what note was he singing? Well, it's actually more in depth than that. Like, here's the note, and here we're towards the top of the note, here we're towards the bottom of the note, okay? And in general, if you were a perfect singer, your pitch would be right in the middle of these notes, okay? But that isn't human, we're not robots, okay? So there's bending, and the sound needs to be able to move around a little bit, okay? So these are the actual pitches that were sung. And you can see that we got these big, like, no-go signs, like do not enter signs, on the notes that are not in the key of the song. AutoTune just grays them out, and this one's just like, nope. And you can see that it already kind of pushed him to the right one. So at this point, this is kind of operating kind of like AutoTune at this point.
If there were prizes for being me, I'd win every category and be inducted in the...
So the other thing that I can do with this now is right here I have a speed control, and a note transition control. So these are kind of backwards. The note transition I would equate to the speed control in AutoTune, and the speed control I would kind of say is the humanize function in AutoTune. Okay, so the cool thing about this is we can actually kind of start seeing what's happening when we pull these. So I'm going to grab the note transition, what we think of as the speed in AutoTune, and watch what happens to these, because this is really all about the transition between notes, how long it takes to achieve the pitch that it thinks it's supposed to be. See how, like, kind of these edges kind of start getting picked up? It's like, yeah, we're going to get you there a lot faster, okay? So I'm going to take this to about a 20.
If there were prizes for being me, I'd win every category and be inducted in the...
Like, that's actually starting to sound a lot smoother. Let's bypass this and listen.
If there were prizes for being me, I'd win every category and... If there were prizes for being me, I'd win every category...
Especially here, you can really hear him kind of getting pushed up to the note, whereas here he was kind of slid up to it, because we can see the original pitch, and now we can see the pitch that we're making him sing, okay? So that's only part of the story, though, okay? So I can also come over here with my speed control, and this is kind of like a humanized control. As I turn this, you're going to see the internal parts of the note. And this is what I was talking about with the humanized control, is it's kind of like the internal parts of the note. You see how these are all getting a lot straighter? We put this speed control back, and you see it allows him to kind of move a little bit in the middle of the note. So I can pull it, I can start kind of getting him more towards the center of each note. So this one is like, how quickly do we get him there on a new note? And then the other one is how much do we hold that note in place?
If there were prizes for being me, I'd win every category and be inducted in the...
Okay. So, for me, once again, this is my personal preference, and people are free to their own opinions. I actually prefer the sound of this plugin a bit over the AutoTune 5 sound. And they kind of, and this is part of the reason they've moved away from it in the more modern versions of AutoTune. Because the other one's kind of thin, kind of buzzy sounding. Which is great for the effect because it just cuts through the mix, but it doesn't sound quite as natural and as warm. So we like using Waves Tune, but let's say a lot of times what we'll actually do here is if someone does want to be kind of corrected, is we'll use this for general correction and then follow it up with one of these if we're looking to get a little bit of that edge in that sound.
If there were prizes for being me, I'd win every category and be inducted in the...
And so the other thing that's nice about this dual approach is that you can have one that goes faster and one that goes slower. If you aren't kind of used to really hearing and evaluating pitch, it makes it a lot easier for you to hear when you hit bad notes or you hear AutoTune like kind of... that kind of should clue you off that there's an issue that you want to take a look at. So this is kind of like the basic when we talk about kind of like automatic mode, okay? So the real power behind using something like this that actually analyzes the audio, okay, is that we can then go in, we can start moving notes around, okay? So if we actually have a note that, let's say, they were a little too close and it pushed them the wrong way, because remember, the software is just guessing. It doesn't actually know what they're singing. It just knows the key of the song, and if they're a little too far one direction, it pushes them to a bad note. So let's, take a look at, for instance, let's say right here. What's going on there?
Prizes for being me, I'd win every cat.
I'd win. We've got an F sharp and a G. They're right next to each other, okay? And you're like, well, what note was he supposed to sing? Well, it was like, we think you were supposed to sing the F sharp. You're supposed to sing this note. Let's listen to the line.
If there were prizes for being me, I'd win every cat.
I'd win. It's another reason that I kind of like this plugin is you have this and it makes noise. So I'm going to grab this note. I'm going to kind of pull it up. Pull up this one here.
If there were prizes for being me, I'd win every category.
Okay. I guess that sounds a little better. Maybe we're taking a little too long on all our note transitions. So check us out. So I kind of tighten everything up a little bit. Now we can see that this is a bit closer into the actual line. We can see that right here, this yellow, remember, that was the original note that was sung.
If there were prizes for being me, I'd win every category.
Okay, but as we do this, we may start to hear artifacts as we really lock it in, and that's where this gets really powerful. Okay, so we're gonna actually run through this by hand here in a minute and talk about some just kind of things to look out for when you're hand tuning and note transitions, and how to get something that's really clean, but at the same time still sounds like a human and not a singing robot. So when someone talks about, let's say, the AutoTune effect, and they're like, man, just AutoTune me. Like, typically they're wanting it as an effect. What that effect actually is, everyone thinks like, oh, it's the plugin per se. It's not necessarily. What it actually is it's when there's no humanity left. So, we've been looking at all these squiggles. This right here, see, each note is just just perfect, right in the middle. Just everything cranked as fast as it can go. If you use AutoTune, that's what you do. This is what that actually looks like. Okay, check it out.
If there were prizes for being me, I'd win every category and be inducted in the...
Okay. The fun thing about this as well is that, once again, if you're not sure what are the right notes or what sounds good or not, this can actually be a really useful way to start training your ear, okay? Because you listen for things that you're just like, ooh, that doesn't sound super clean. Why doesn't that sound clean?
If there were prizes for... If there were...
Okay, so that's okay. Maybe we shouldn't have this little thing.
If there were prizes for being...
What's this? What's that? Prizes for... okay, no, that's the wrong note. That should be there.
If there were prizes for being me,
Okay, so you kind of start hearing all that, and then you can be like, oh, hang on, let me put some humanity back in this.
If there were prizes for being me, I'd win every...
Okay, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, well, I thought that note was okay. Actually, it wasn't. It's a lot easier to hear that when you crank it all the way up. Okay, just be careful if you have an artist in the room, because a lot of times they'll be like, whoa, I didn't say to do that. Just be like, it's okay. This is how we fix it. Oftentimes I ask artists to either go take a break, step out of the room, or let them know that it's going to sound a lot worse before it sounds better. It's a very humbling thing to be doing this and tuning an artist's vocals in front of them. Because you are literally going after and exposing all of the bad notes that they hit. And especially if you have someone that's already very skittish about using AutoTune or pitch correction, which is like so many artists nowadays, Just be really careful in terms of how you present it. Don't make it sound. Normally, I just call it vocal editing because that's what this is. Because the fact of the matter is that until you've done this to the vocal, you can't really mix it. Okay. By locking in somebody's pitch on a singer, your EQ works better because all of a sudden the notes that they're hitting are consistent. Like every time that he hits this A, like it's gonna be 440 hertz. Like it's just gonna be pegged right there. It's not gonna be 445 because he was sharp, or 435 because he was flat. It's gonna be 440. So the EQ that I set on his vocal just works better. You ever notice that like if you've taken someone and like hard tuned them for effect, their voice just cuts through the mix better? That's because they're staying in the exact same spots time after time, and you're just able to set the rest of the mix better. The tone of their voice isn't moving around. You're having to gouge all these huge holes and everything to hear them because it makes them more consistent in their performance. So yeah, like you really shouldn't be like performing a full mix down on a singer until you've edited their vocals, which a huge part of that is the tuning. Okay, so check this out. So we can actually take a look at, let's say, what AutoTune would do. Put one of these down here. So let's see what happens if we set AutoTune to crush. We're just going to use this just to see what AutoTune does now. I'm actually going to bypass this. Yeah, let's set AutoTune to crush here. Let's see what happens.
If there were prizes for being me, I'd win every category and be inducted in the... I just think you'd be a better you, so go on, do what you do, be abolished.
So we can actually see that even when we have AutoTune set to full-on crush, it's still not, there's still actually just a hair of humanity left. We still see some of the notes bending, okay? So just because someone says, like, let's say, rappers like, yeah, like throw AutoTune on this verse, more often than not, I still end up going through by hand. Maybe I have an AutoTune afterwards. Well, I still end up going through by hand because I can actually get this a lot tighter. Like, hell, I could take this then and... that's way tight. And it's able to do it because it already knows what audio to expect. Okay? When you actually run AutoTune in real time, it's having to take that in and make decisions immediately. This is able to make its decisions. It incurs a lot of latencies, but that's because it's able to look ahead at what's coming, and it makes better decisions. The same thing when you put AutoTune into graphical mode, or when you're not using modern AutoTune in its live mode. If you are using a more like recent version of AutoTune, pull this up, UA version. You do have the one other knob on it called Flex Tune. First UA plug already. Always takes a minute to load. There we go. Okay. So let's get. So here's more modern AutoTune. You can see that we basically have all the same stuff here. Okay, we have our tracking, scale detune, retune speed, humanize. Vibrato control, notice I didn't mention that. In general, stay away from it. It can respond real weird. If you need to get into working with someone's vibrato, you need to go by hand. Like, you have to. All right, so you have correction style. This is effectively a wet-dry knob. I don't know what a wet-dry knob is. It's like the amount of the effect that's being applied. It's not technically what it is, but okay. But the thing is, right here when it says correction style classic, that means it's acting on everything. At flex, it's like, we'll let some stuff slide all the way to none. This is a wet-dry knob. So this is, I'm honestly, I'm not a huge fan of it. Like, this is effectively for someone that just likes to set, they just set it to fastest and humanize, and then someone's like, that's too much AutoTune. They're like, oh, okay, I'll just back this off here. Like, no, like, use your other controls. Like, actually use the software properly. You'll get better results. So I don't recommend relying on the Flex Tune control, even the more modern stuff. Maybe you can automate it on certain notes that you're hearing too much on, but you could just as easily automate the retune speed or the humanize function. Or more realistically, tune it by hand. I guess that's the big takeaway that I hope everybody comes away from today, is that really you should be just about tuning everything by hand. All right, so just to kind of finish our tour around AutoTune, one other thing that we have here, and that's the scale detune, okay? The same way that you tune an instrument, you can tune AutoTune. You have to tell AutoTune what's its reference point in the world of audio to make sure that it's taking a person's voice and making it the same key and pitch of your song. Just because you import an instrumental that you're recording on top of doesn't mean that it is in what we consider standard tuning, okay? So what would have happened if I was like, oh, this music that we're listening to is in E. Well, let's say at some point the artist or the producer was like, oh, I like the song, but it should just be a little faster. And they just sped it up and the pitch of it raised. They didn't do like a speed up where they kept it like the same pitch. And so they made it just a little bit faster. Now that E, it's now somewhere between an E and an F. It's somewhere in between those notes on the keyboard. So you can't, the artist has written to it at this tempo. You're not going to just go change it and try to pitch it back down. So you actually modify AutoTune. So you're like, oh, it's somewhere between E and F, so I need to kind of push this sharp. At that point, you can use your ears. There's, if anybody wants to know like a really good way to do that, I can show you a good way to do that. But hopefully you aren't running into out of tune music too much, where someone gives you a track that you're going to record over, and you're like, this doesn't work. But the thing is, if you don't adjust that at that point, it'll really screw up the vocalist if you're trying to track with it on. If you put it on afterwards, you're just gonna be like, you just sound like you're sick the whole time, because the pitch is just off by like a quarter tone. And so a lot of people are just like, it sounds all right, but it also sounds bad. If that's ever happening, that means that the music is probably not in standard tuning. So like, play the song, find that root note again, play a note up, play a note down. And if you're like, this one's pretty correct, but none of these are correct, that means your track's not in standard tuning. And you need to figure out exactly how much. And that's when we get into working with sense and just barely pitch shifting stuff up. But you change where AutoTune's like center of pitch is. So it still does its thing like normal, but you're just like recalibrate it to be like in the exact key of whatever your instrumental is. But I don't want to go too far into that because that can get kind of heavy. Oh yeah, I guess last thing to kind of look at on this is once again the vibrato functionality. You shouldn't be using vibrato functionality in real time. We can take a look at the vibrato functionality in hand tuning, and that's definitely useful sometimes. But the vibrato function here is not useful. Because you can't just apply a blanket setting to someone's vibrato. Everyone know what vibrato is, right? If I hold a note, you like kind of it sounds like somebody's shaking you, that's vibrato. It was classically done in the past because when people held notes, it's really hard to just hold that pitch perfectly, so people would naturally bend the note a little bit back and forth, and it made it sound pretty and things like that. Typically nowadays, especially in pop, like vibrato is like no. Like gospel, huge vibrato. R&B, people definitely still sing with vibrato, so it just kind of depends. But anyway, so that's going to be a basic walkthrough of AutoTune, like basic AutoTune. Anybody have any questions, any control on this, or anything they've used that seems weird, or thoughts to share?
Does that come around often, like people with AutoTune music?
I would say I run into it about once a month. I mean, and I hear from, I've heard from other engineers here running into it. I mean, that's also, that's a lot of. I mean, I would probably say that we run into it maybe one every 400 tracks or so. So I'm not gonna say it's super often, but yeah, you certainly run into it. Recognizing that something's wrong is half the battle. So that's why you really just have to be like, this kind of sounds right and kind of sounds wrong at the same time. Like, that's your clue that something bad's happening. With the pitch, mainly when you go to your piano, or if you don't have a piano, I'll show you this. If you're using ProTools, pull up an instrument, like seriously, you can just pull up a mini grand, play the beat, and you can literally just kind of and just use that to find, or any synth or something like that'll work. But you could, if you're playing the track and hitting that note, like they should be like boom, like perfect on. If they aren't, then you need to take a look at modifying the pitch for every single AutoTune that you're using. You'll see that even here, you see where it says reference 440. 440 hertz is an A. That's what everybody agrees on. You have a tuning fork, standard little tuning fork this size. You hit it, ding, it's made. When you hit it, it vibrates 440 times a second. That's 440 hertz. It makes a perfect A sound. That's an A. So that's what everybody agrees on for music. Because the thing is the space between notes can change, actually. There's a lot of different ways to actually tune a piano, where 440 is still A every time, but just kind of the math of how it works, there's a couple different ways to do it. Actually, different classical composers wrote for different styles, or different types of tuning as well. I think Todd's favorite one that he talks about is the one called the Wolf. It's because like two half steps are a little bit closer and they just slightly clash a little bit, and so they write certain pieces to hit it a certain, like it's actually pretty cool. Typically everything that we work on is all what's considered like equal spacing between the notes. So I wouldn't, once again, that's why I say you could take college classes on it, and it's really cool stuff, but not super useful for what we do anyways. But it's cool to know. Anyways, cool. I want to take 10 minutes, refresh some coffee, and then we're going to come back and actually sit down and start running through some actual tuning and looking at actual issues in a vocal and how we actually like fix them, both for like R&B style and for pop style, and kind of what that looks like visually and what that sounds like, so you can actually make some good decisions on it. But anyways, cool. Educational section done. Application next. All right. So actually, I want to actually switch gears to a different song real quick. Yeah, that's that. There's an old session. All right, cool. All right, it's an old session. All right, cool. So let's take a look at this. Is this the song that I think? Yeah.
Wandering all alone in the shadows.
Possibly. This is about 2 years old. This is a song by Marcus Addison.
Yeah, okay.
He's one of our front desk guys. Okay.
Yeah, I seen it on the gram, I think.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I think he did a video for it. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Okay. I'm just gonna get
Really good song.
get a little bit of just a touch of compression on this, so we can kind of listen to it. So when going to tune stuff, like, as much as like you can't like fully mix it, like make sure that you have some amount of compression EQ on it, that it sounds decent to you, because you want to be able to listen to it and evaluate it the way that you're used to listening to vocals. If something has all sorts of problems with it, like just on a technical side of like, like it's not compressed, or the spectrum response of it is totally off, like it's all bass heavy or something, like go ahead and take care of a little bit of that first. You don't need to go super far with it, but just get it polished up enough so you can like really evaluate it.
Wandering all alone in the shadows, no hope to be found. Broken hearted in the darkness, crying out from afar, until your love reached down, picked me up.
Cool. Just so we get rid of some latency. We're using some cool LA2As, but we're gonna back off from that.
Wandering all alone in the shadows.
I want you a little bit more detailed compression here. So I'll show you guys at least what I'm doing. So once again, just got Neutron up. Probably do a little bit of parallel on this. Get clicks. So.
The darkness, crying out from afar, until your love reached the darkness, crying out from afar. 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 The darkness, crying out from afar.
There we go. Let's get that smoothed out a little bit. Okay, cool. So, I guess we'll probably start taking a look at just some of these sections here in this verse. Look, this is really straight ahead, just kind of dancey, singy track. I don't know, R&B-ish pop type of thing. So first off, I'm just going to listen to the music, and we need to figure out what key we're in. So I'm going to take a big section of the song. Right. So people that are listening online probably couldn't hear that. But here, I was hitting the right note on the keyboard. You notice it sounded, did you hear this sound a little sick almost? You're like, that's kind of the right note, but that's also kind of not the right note. So, tell you what, I will pull it up here so we can actually hear it all together coming out of the speakers at the same time. Stereo aux input, let's put in a MIDI grand. I didn't realize the song was out of key. Alright, so. Hear that? Like you're like, that's the note, but that's not the note. Okay, that when you hear that means your song's out of key. Okay, so this is good. We actually get to go through this exercise real quick. So this is how I like to do it. There's probably 1,000 different ways to do it. I'm gonna grab me an AutoTune. I know that the song wants to be in F sharp.
Uh-huh.
Actually, I'm gonna. All right, cool. Yeah, good. I think Dorothy worked on this with Marcus and pulling up the AutoTunes. I see that she totally did this. So awesome. I seriously had no idea this song was out of key. We were talking about it earlier. That's really funny, actually. Yeah, this is cool. So we're gonna do it. So here's what we do. Okay, I know that the song wants to be in F sharp. Okay. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna remove all the keys from the scale. And I'm only going to allow F sharp to happen. Okay? Like, well, where are we going to put? What sound are we going to make come through this? Well, I'm going to come up and I'm going to grab a signal generator. Okay? And I'm going to take this and I'm going to put it down into an octave. We can see right here, that's the note that's actually being played. So let's put this into something that can go to like around 440 hertz. That'll be an A. But it's not allowing it to do an A, it's pushing it to that F sharp, okay? That's the sound that's actually happening, okay? And you can hear, doom, it's now on F sharp. Now AutoTune is set in standard tuning, so if I pull up my mini grand and hit that same F sharp, that's in tune. Okay, that F sharp is in standard tuning, okay? But the beat's out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the track now, and I'm going to start messing with the detune here in AutoTune. Here I'm changing the pitch of AutoTune. I'm going to mess with this here until I hear it lock in and sounds good and meshes. This is just a thing that if you don't hear pitch very well yet, you need to do ear training, okay? I mean, seriously, if you're working with singers, you need to be doing ear training and you need to understand basic music theory. But if people want to go over all that stuff, we'll definitely set up a class and do it. But for today, we're going to assume that we all have an idea. And so now I have this tone going. I'm going to play the song now. Okay, so first off, here when I play it, here it's kind of like...
Yes.
That's what something sounding out of tune is, okay? Now me listening to that, I can hear that it's flat, okay?
Right. So
which means it's
like
it's beneath, okay? So that means I need to push it sharp. I need to push it higher, okay? Now all of a sudden we kind of heard it kind of lock in. I had it underneath. I went a little too far. Rock it back and forth. That sounds good. I now feel like that doesn't sound like it's fighting. Let me set it back to where we were, which was 0. Thereabout. You hear how like when it's hitting, when the bass and that vocal sample that's in the track, or hear how that sound, that tone, that sine wave just kind of disappeared into the song for a second. Like, do I even hear it anymore? That means it's in tune. If it was out of tune, you would still be hearing it fighting. But because when everything's in tune, everything just works. Okay, yeah. That's one of our 10 commandments of engineering here. Yeah. Audio should be in tune and on time. If it's not, it's a nightmare to try to mix it because you just have these parts that don't work together. You should be setting stuff up to go like this. Right. So they have to be in tune and on time. Anyways, so that's how we find, and that's how we adjust AutoTune. We talked about it briefly. I was like, yeah, but it doesn't really happen that often. You should know how to do it, but we're not going to go over it. Well, apparently this song we had to go over. So anyways, so I now know that every AutoTune that I use, I need to have it set. This right here, it needs to be set to 39 cents sharp, or else AutoTune will be tuning him, but it'll be tuning his voice flat. Right. And he's going to sound really bad. Okay? So, Alright, so yeah, so we can start. So we know that we're in F sharp. I'm going to assume minor, because why would we not be? Very rarely are we in major. Almost always in minor. So yeah, so let's kind of just start taking a look at, oh yeah, see we're in F sharp and 39 cents. Yeah. So let's just kind of take a listen to this vocal real quick.
Wandering all alone in the shadows, no hope to be found. Broken hearted in the darkness, crying out from afar, until your love reached down, picked me up from the ground, and shined a light on my feet. Then I heard you.
Okay, so that one that just came in there, it was not running any AutoTune. So these are really nice settings, and I'm just kind of looking at I think the settings that were last used on this. And this kind of, as me, let's say a mix engineer that pulls up somebody else's session, I actually glean a lot from this, okay? Because the rough mix, the way it was left with the artist, is normally a way that the artist is comfortable with, and the tuning of their vocals and what they're looking for, okay? So I can get in their mind space. I can see that up here on our tracking, we're resting more towards choosy. So that means that it's important to the artist that they're allowed to bend into the notes. They're not looking to be pop-tuned or T-pained or anything like that. They want to sound really natural. And so in this case, this AutoTune was being used just to kind of allow them to kind of sound natural here, but then slowly grab the backs of the notes. That way there's a good, consistent core of pitch, but it doesn't rob them of their performance on the first parts of it. And that being said, for me personally, it's a little bit more than I would like, especially with a song that kind of has like a tech bass and something like this. I feel like it should probably be a little bit tighter. And I think we'll probably push it that way just for the sake of going in by hand and doing this tuning. So I look at that, I'm like, cool, that's awesome, great, I understand what's going on. Bypass it. So we're actually going to go grab what we're actually going to do our main tuning with. I'm going to throw in a waves tune. Up here at the pitch, is remember the reference? That's the note. So I'm going to look at my AutoTune to see what that came out at. So for this song, an A is not 440 hertz, it's 450 hertz. So I need to enter my reference pitch in to 450. Okay. Cool. So I got that done. Let's see, let's put this to F sharp, natural minor. Cool. All right. So now we're just going to kind of play this through so these can analyze into these two plugins.
Wandering all alone in the shadows, no hope to be found. Broken hearted in the darkness, crying out from afar, until your love reached down, picked me up from the ground, and shined a light on my feet. Then I heard you speak, tears washed over me. You don't know how long I've been waiting just to hear from you.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so let's go take a look at these. Let's start with our first phrase. And have all this up here. Typically when really working on phrases, I like turning off auto scroll because I'm like, seriously, I'll do it myself. So normally when working on stuff, I'm gonna actually just highlight kind of a section of audio, because I don't want to just keep listening to other parts. I want to focus on this, okay? So I know that I don't want to kind of overtune this, okay? So I'm going to have to really make decisions about these little things and these little like pickups as he swells into notes and some of these things. Should I leave them or not, okay? And that's really going to be a stylistic decision, okay? Once again, if this was like an AutoTune rapper, then no, like everything needs to be completely straight notes, but this needs to still sound somewhat natural. I want there to be a little bit more of a sharpness and a pop and an edge to the fronts of the notes though. I want everything just to be a little bit crisper in terms of the note and pitch accuracy. That's me personally, so we're gonna do it.
Wondering all alone, wondering all.
Okay, so I hear the bends in on these first few parts. So I'm going to kind of make some global decisions because I know he's pretty consistent in how he hits his notes. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to start by pulling my note transition down, which once again, this is akin to the speed control in AutoTune. So the kind of the first thing you go for. So you can see as I do this, you can see these edges of these notes right here. You see what's happening to them, okay?
Yeah.
You see they're kind of popping towards the beginning. So that's the note transition, okay? By default in Waves Tune, it's at 120. when something like this, my gut tells me I'm going to probably push this to around 60 or 70 for starters. And then the speed control is the internals of the note, okay? So as I do this...
Does both of those work kind of like the retune speed?
The note transition is much akin to the speed.
Right, okay.
And the speed control in WavesTune is akin to the humanize function. Okay.
Okay.
If you right now, I haven't. All I'm touching is speed. Check this out right here. We has a little bit of vibrato. As I put this to 0, it becomes a straight line. It tunes the internal of the note when they hit a note. Okay. Okay. So I'm gonna probably push this up maybe to 10. Let's just give this a listen.
Wandering all alone in the shadows.
Okay. Let's bypass.
Wandering all alone in the shadows. Wandering all.
All of a sudden, you hear that wondering, dun dun dun, very clean, precise, good intervals. All of a sudden, like I hear it, like hit me. I'm like, ooh, I want to listen to this. Like it actually grabs me. So it's serving the creative purposes of the song. So I like it. I may go in, and especially when I'm first starting to tune something, you kind of have to learn to read somebody's voice. And I'm like, well, should he be allowed to kind of bend through these here or not? I don't know. So I'm just going to grab these and I'm going to push them up. I'm going to hear.
Wondering all.
So undo it.
Wondering all.
I kind of like it like this. I kind of like this. I felt the other one sounded a little unnatural.
Yeah, give it a little life.
It gives it a little bit of life, but it didn't take away from the things that I liked about it.
Right.
Okay? And typically, if it didn't add anything and I liked it before, then we're good. I don't want to overprocess this, okay?
Wondering all.
Okay, so I'm going to get really nitty-gritty on this. Is wondering the ing isn't dead on, okay? And if we look at it, we can see this thing right here, wondering, okay? We kind of overshoot and come back in. This is a pretty common thing that happens to vocalists when they're both singing with a little bit of vibrato on every note. And also when you have quick note transitions, a lot of times you overshoot and they kind of hear it and feel it and they overcompensate. Also, when people really push air, they're probably going to shoot sharp a little bit over the note before they come back in. So I'm going to grab this one note individually now, and I'm probably going to just see if I can just kind of get this happening a little bit tighter.
Wondering all.
Okay? I like that. I didn't hear it push quite as high on the first part.
Wondering all.
Okay? So now we have, I like to think of these as like stair steps between notes, okay? Wondering all. And people do that a lot, especially pop R&B. And when I say like, I mean like pop R&B, both pop and pop R&B. I consider like classic R&B, and then you have pop R&B. Yeah. Like Chris Brown is pop R&B. Okay. Yeah. So a lot of times on these note transitions, we have to decide. And once again, this is like setting the vernacular, the vocabulary for how the singer sings. Should they be allowed to bend there, or should it be like stair steps? Should it be oh, or should it be oh, like just like right between it, or not? So I mean, I kind of see like this doesn't sound bad. But should it be sharper and snappier? That would be more pushing towards a pop as opposed to a classic R&B style, okay? So what I'm going to do is I've got these two notes here, is I'm just going to mess with the note transition for starters. Because you can see as I do that, see what happens? They're kind of like really starting to lock in there. So let's see.
Wondering all.
Okay, so that's probably a little much for this. Also, what can happen was that we can see that originally he didn't arrive at the pitch till there, and now he's getting there early. So maybe let's just...
Wondering all alone.
That sounds clean. And let's see, what's happening with this little guy here?
Wondering all alone.
Should that be there, or should it be up here?
Wondering all alone.
That sounds pretty damn clean to me, okay? I don't hear any auto-tune, but that sounds just very clear.
Wondering all alone.
Maybe this right here, we can relax the back of this. Actually, would be the start of this one, just a hair.
Wondering all alone.
Okay. Okay, all Okay, so these other notes, do we need them? Should this one be here for part of the slide? This note is definitely not right.
Wondering all alone.
Okay, I want this to be tighter.
Wondering all alone in the shadows.
Okay. So here's where we're at.
Wondering all alone.
Let's bypass and here where we were, which you should always be doing. So make sure that you're not just running down a long path, because what can happen to this, same way as when you're using compressors a lot and you're mixing at high volumes, you start compressing more, you start making stuff brighter the longer that you work on something because your ears get tired. Same thing can happen with tuning. You get so obsessed with the individual parts of tuning that you start over tuning it, and it starts very natural, and by the end it's like just auto-tuned all hell and you don't hear it because you got used to a sound and then kept pushing it more and more. So we're going to listen to this bypass.
Wandering all alone in the shadow. Wandering all alone in the shadow.
Okay, I think that still sounds pretty. That sounds pretty classy. I like that. You hear how like the tone of what he's singing, like it just sounds better. The compressors, everything's grabbing better. Okay, one of the reasons that you see me putting my tuning before my processing. Okay. Because also I want to be able to take this when I'm done, and I'm going to print my processing. And I don't want to, or I want to print my pitch, like a correction. Right. I don't want to print my compression and EQ because I might need to tweak that. So I'm going to put it before, but still I want to monitor it as close to a finished product. Once again, I'm still going to need to tweak it, but it's just, it gives you a better idea of like what's really going on. Also really useful, once again, if an artist is in the room.
Alone in the shadows.
So I'm going to kind of just work here a little bit fast.
Alone in the shadows. So
like right here, we actually have a little bit of vibrato. We can see that he hits it, and then we get a little bit of vibrato happening. So, so this is where if we want to, I can synth some vibrato. I can give it some depth. I can put pre-delay on it, which means it's gonna wait a little bit until it starts. And so I can kind of do some other things to kind of shape it, and I can actually kind of shape it to kind of match his like what he was kind of doing there.
Alone in the shadows, all alone in the shadows.
You heard just that little, but it's like, but the center of that vibrato is right in the middle of the note. So on something like that, maybe I want to have that there. Personally, I don't know if I like it. I'm also just personal preference. I'm not a big fan of vibrato. I'm like, just sing the note. But some people love it, you know, and so I have to take my ego and my preferences out of it, you know.
All alone in the shadow.
Personally, I like that note a lot better without it. The vibrato distracts me from it. I really like how clean and pure his tone is right now, and I feel like all this pitch modulation is kind of taking me out of it a little bit. So we can see that over here on this next phrase, though, the vibrato was so wide that it actually pushed him up to these notes. This is one of the reasons that you don't want to use AutoTune in real time, especially on singers, because when they do stuff like this, AutoTune is pushing them up to these notes. You don't have any way of correcting it. You got to do it by hand. So right here, I'm going to take this, let's push this down.
All alone in the shadows. All alone in the shadows.
Okay, all of a sudden you hear that and you're like, ooh, it's like, it almost is edgy.
All alone in the shadows. No.
And then we can listen to that and be like, well, is that, was that too much vibrato? Maybe tighten it up.
All alone in the shadows.
This note right here that jumps in, we can see is still towards the top end of being sharp, so I'm going to kind of pull it back.
All alone in the shadows. All alone in the shadows.
Okay, I think that feels pretty good. If we were going for like pure pop and we didn't want him to have any vibrato, then we would come back and kind of really start tightening this all in.
All alone in the shadows.
But you start to hear some of that sound of being processed, which we don't want, and I don't want this to be too poppy, so yeah, we're going to kind of put this back. But I definitely like this core part leading into a jump up. Whenever you have an interval that happens, especially like a da-da-dum, whenever you have that kind of stair step thing, it's really important that this note needs to be at its center pitch before it jumps up to here, and it needs to jump up to the center of the pitch there, because that's what makes the interval happen, okay? That's what makes it sound good to us. Interval is the space between notes, okay? Yeah. So if I go from a little bit underneath to a little bit over, if I'm a quarter tone under and I'm a half tone over here, and it was supposed to be 3, it's no longer 3.5. It's no longer 3. Now it's a 3.5 step. And that just isn't right. That's not what people expect to hear. So they want to hear when somebody jumps between those jumps to be accurate, okay? And if there's a bend there, that's fine, but when they actually arrive at the note, they better arrive at the note, okay? So where someone actually ends up like hitting the note at is one of the most important things to pay attention to when tuning.
No hope, no. No hope, no hope.
Okay, once again, this little vibrato in here, I think this is something that we're gonna kind of see as we run through this, is that this little vibrato here is, I think, is really killing some of the clarity actually of his voice.
No hope to.
Okay, let me put this back real quick.
No hope.
Okay, that versus.
No hope to.
Okay, that just sounds a little clearer. It just actually cuts through the mix better because the pitches are just on.
No hope to.
Dun. Yep. Let's try something like that. You can see that isn't looking very good. This is gonna be way too.
No hope to.
Or not.
No hope to be.
And really what I'm listening for is this phrase and this phrase should match each other in terms of how clean they are.
No hope to be found. No hope to be found.
This right here sounds a little off to me. Sure enough, it's not quite in the center of the note.
No hope to be found. Broken hearted in the darkness.
Okay, so let's grab a next phrase.
Broken heart. Broken hearted in. Broken heart.
Like we're hitting that a little late. Sounds like that should.
Broken hearted in.
I feel like when he hits that note, we're still going a little over. We're overshooting just a touch.
Broken hearted in the. Broken hearted in the dark. In the.
Ah, you heard that vibrato?
In the dark.
Okay. Yeah, let's pull that back down to there.
In the darkness.
Okay. Once again, we can see that the yellow line is what was originally sung there.
In the dark. In the darkness. In the darkness. In the dark. In the darkness.
Okay. Those little connecting words make a big difference.
In the darkness, crying.
So you heard that on when he said the nis. You notice there's no note there. It's all formants. There's almost no pitch to it, so it didn't detect it. So you notice that right here.
Broken hearted in the darkness, crying.
Listen, he goes nis. There's nothing attuned to that. You know, that's a formant. We don't want to pitch shift that because if we do, it'll start sounding like a screw vocal or something like that. You know, so it didn't even detect it. So if something doesn't detect like that, like that's okay. If you have someone that does a lot of shouting or stuff like that, pitch correction may not work very well on them. You know, because there's so much into the aspiration part of their voice, the airy, breathy part, just in a shouty way, because you still have a lot of that comes forward, but you actually don't have quite as much tone. When people shout, a lot of times they think that makes their voice sound big, but it's actually the opposite. Your voice gets very small because you lose all the bass and resonance in the chest when you do it. And that's the stuff that gets picked up for pitch detection. So, right, so let's kind of keep working through this here. Right, Mel?
In the darkness, crying. In the darkness, crying.
Right there, right.
In the darkness, crying. In the dark.
That interval still sounds just a little to me, and I think what it is I like where it lands, but this one isn't quite jumping off from the right spot.
In the darkness, crying out. In the darkness, crying out from afar, until your love reached down, picked me up from the ground, and shined the light.
We don't need breaths leading and overlapping. Thank you. Alright, so yeah, let's take a look at this one. And let's see. Same vocalist. So what were the general settings that I moved stuff to? It's probably like this. 65 and 10. So I'm going to just select everything here. And just for my starting point, 65, 10. Alright, let's run through this.
Until your love reached. until you love.
Okay, you're like, why doesn't that sound good? Well, investigate. Take a look at it. That top note doesn't sound good because we can see, remember what I was saying earlier? It hits the center of the pitch, but where does it hit the center of the pitch? At the end of the note. It just doesn't sound good. You didn't land on the note. The other thing that we can see is that it's also kind of misinterpreted what he was doing, because we can see in the original line here, we can see that he actually did hit the pitch there, and this is kind of pushing him off, so I'm going to drag this blob back for starters.
Until your love reached.
Okay, so that sounds better. This is why auto scroll sucks, by the way.
Until your love.
Okay, so this one a little sharp, this one a little sharp and irregular. This note's actually pretty good. So I'm going to tighten these all.
Until your love, until your love.
I'm going to tighten this one.
Until your love reached, until your love reached.
Yeah, now we're starting to hear it.
Until your love reached down, until your love reached down, until your love reached down, picked me up from the ground.
Okay, then he goes back, pick me up. That should sound just as clean as this other part. Like, one of the big things of when you're tuning is compare one section to another section where they're singing the same vocal line. It should have the same feel, and the tuning should basically match. That doesn't mean that the numbers are going to be the same. You got to use your ears. But if it's until the bottom and you kind of make it snap a certain way, you better make sure every other time that transition happens, it snaps the same. Okay? Don't ever look at it as just this one. Listen to the previous section. Also, if you can, listen to previous sections kind of in stride to kind of keep yourself honest once again.
Until your love reached down, picked me up from the.
Okay, so we hear that this is nowhere near as clean as the other one.
And shine the light on my feet, and shine. Love reached down, picked me up from the ground, and shine. Your love reached down, picked me up from the ground, and shine.
Ground.
Your love reached down, picked me up from the ground, me up from the.
You hear on ground that we have a lot of kind of modulation in the pitch.
Me up from the ground, and me up from the ground.
Maybe we can give a little bit of a dig into this so we get ground.
Me up from the ground.
Let's see if we can relax this a little bit, make this work.
Me up from the ground, and shine the light. Up from the ground, and shine the light, and shine.
Maybe something about that file.
And shine.
Okay. Yeah.
And shine the light from the ground, and shine the from the ground, and shine the light on. From the ground, and shine.
Alright, so this might be a good candidate to kind of flatten the note for start.
From the ground, and shine the light.
Okay, because we have this really wide vibrato kind of happening there, so maybe we can. Oh man, I'm gonna glue some of these sections together. I want these to not operate as separate notes. Oops. There we go. All right, so I use my pre-delay control. You see, it kind of pushes the vibrato back. The rate is kind of like how quickly it vibrates. So I kind of adjust that, and you see, I kind of try to match it to about the timing that's there. And then the depth is going to be how deep.
From the ground, and shine the light on. From the ground, and shine the light.
Okay, so I flatten the note and then put back vibrato on my terms. Okay. So that's actually how you use vibrato controls, okay? So if we were like, oh, that's cool, but he just did this really wide vibrato, you know, we actually wanted him to do 3 there. Okay.
From the ground, and shine the light on.
Let's make him go nuts.
From the ground, and shine the light.
Okay. But once again, I mean, we can go really freaking wide.
From the ground, and shine the light.
Okay.
From the ground, and shine the light.
Okay, let's listen to what it was originally.
And shine the light out and shine the light.
That's actually pretty close to what he originally did, okay?
Right.
So you're like, okay, well, maybe I just want to just, tighten that in just a little bit. But the thing is, whereas we can see that these were up, his core of the note he was sharp on, okay? And so we needed to bring him back down so his average pitch was in the middle of the note, but it sounds weird without that vibrato, so then we're going to be like, okay, let's put the vibrato back in. But now the vibrato is centered in the middle of the note, which is where you want it to be.
Out and shine the light on. Out and shine the light. Out and shine the light on. Out and shine the light on. Out and shine the light on my feet.
Yeah, you just want to hear a little bit of that dig on that bottom note, because you can see that originally, if you look at the original yellow line here, is that this is the note we were going for. We never got fully down to it. And that's a pretty common thing when singing because you're moving fast through these notes, right? So sometimes you gotta just kind of help them get down a little bit further.
Out and shine the light on my feet. Then I heard you speak. Tears washed over. Then I heard. Then I heard you. Then I heard you. Then I heard you. Then I heard you speak. Tears washed over me. I heard you speak.
Yep, so all these notes right here, let's pick them up.
I heard you speak. Tears washed.
When you hit those single notes like that, like you can almost get away with making them flat lines on things like that.
I heard you speak. Tears washed over.
All of a sudden you're like, there's kind of almost a sweetness to that word there that wasn't there before. It's not EQ, not compression, it's just pitch.
I heard you speak. Tears washed over. I heard you speak. Tears washed over. Speak. Tears washed. Speak. Tears washed.
Okay, you hear that? You're just like, that's not great. It's because we need to have a sharper step here, okay? Because we're putting in slightly sharper steps every other time that this type of note transition happens.
Speak. Tears washed over. Speak. Speak. Tears washed over me. You don't know. Speak. Tears washed over me.
Okay. So the timing was a little bit off, so sometimes you can look at and be like, well, did you need to get there or there, and kind of play around with it. And then maybe give it a little bit of humanness back.
Speak. Tears washed over me. You don't know how long. Speak. Tears washed over me. Speak. Tears washed over me. You don't know how long. Speak. Tears washed over me. You don't speak. Tears washed over me. You don't know how long I've been waiting just to hear. Speak. Tears washed over me.
I'm still not super happy with this. Let's listen to what was originally sung, see if we can kind of decipher.
Speak. Tears washed over.
Tears. Maybe we're giving too much credit. Maybe they shouldn't be.
Speak. Tears washed over. Speak. Tears washed over.
Yep, we shouldn't have had any bend there at all.
Speak. Tears washed over.
Typically, if you're having issues with something, listen to it and you're probably overthinking.
Speak. Tears washed over. Speak. Tears washed over me. Speak. Tears washed over me. Speak. Tears washed over me. You don't know. Speak. Tears washed over me. You don't know how long I've been waiting. You don't know how long. You don't know how long I'm. You don't.
So it's one of those, once again, where it's like, should we have those there? Or should we just be going right for it?
You don't know how long. You don't.
Sometimes you can get away with that, and sometimes you need to, because if we want impact on that, and he's coming in strong, bends are not impactful. It's just got to hit right on the note.
You don't know how. You don't. You don't know how long. You don't. You don't know how long. You don't know how. You don't know how long. You don't know how long I've been. You don't know. You don't know how long. You don't know how long I've been waiting. You don't know how long.
Let's see, listen to that phrase now without.
You don't know how long.
You know how much more impact is there when the notes are like right?
You don't know how long I've been waiting. I've been waiting. I've been. I've been waiting. I've been waiting. I've been waiting just. I've been waiting just to hear from you. I've been waiting just to. I've been waiting. I've been waiting just. I've been waiting just to.
Yeah, right here. This needs to be super clean.
I've been waiting just to hear from. I've been waiting just to hear from you. I've been waiting just to hear from you.
Once again, impact, quick changes, things like that can go a really long way. As opposed to, I know this is actually what was sung here. I kind of like the idea of getting just a little bit of edge on it. I just feel like it's a climax and we want it to punch and jump out even more. You notice that like on this last phrase, I'm just tuning it tighter, and that's just totally a stylistic thing.
Right.
Like I want to hear those notes popping and just being able to punch and hit harder.
Waiting just to hear from you. Hear from you. Hear from you. Hear from you.
Let's see if we can put a little bit of. Well, it's pretty laying back into spot.
Hear from you. Hear from you. Hear from you. Hear from you. From you. From you.
Kind of like how he hits the top one, but I want this one to be.
From you.
Once again, when the front of this note's tighter, you'll hear that he just punches the U a little harder. The U.
From you.
Okay. Listen to this last part without it.
Hear from you.
Okay. Forward then with tuning.
Hear from you.
No tuning on that one, sorry. Now with tuning.
Hear from you.
Okay. Because when his voice matches, you know, the bass line that comes in, because the pitch is all like dead on, we end up with something that just works a lot better. The other thing that you'll find is that you don't have to like cut as big of holes for the stuff that you're working on. All right, so now we got that done. Yeah, we can probably come back down.
Wandering all alone in the shadows, no hope to be found. Broken hearted in the darkness.
Okay. So we've got that there once again. So this is kind of tuned to a little bit more like pop R&B. Not quite like full-on pop or like edgy. But if we wanted to put it there really quick, okay, what I recommend then is we go back and we pull in our AutoTune. If we wanted to hit the tops of the notes, we'll relax it.
Wandering all alone in the shadows, no hope to be found. Broken hearted in the darkness.
Okay? And you're like, oh, you just hear a little bit of like that auto-tune sound on top of it. But we aren't worrying about any of the notes freaking out because we just went through by hand, made sure he was singing all the correct notes, right? So now I'm actually back to using auto-tune for effect and feel. You know, you could even go so far as to be like, I only want this, you know, to come in on.
Wandering all. Wandering all.
Wrong way. Come on, auto-tune. Come on, buddy. Yeah. Can you bypass, please? There we go. Thank you. It's like update your automation lane, please.
Wandering all alone in the shadows. In the shadows.
We're gonna get like that Demi Lovato, like, you know, like vibrato going on.
In the shadows. Wandering all alone in the shadows.
You know, you do that, put a phaser on those words into a reverb or something like that, and now you got something that's like super cool, stylistic, okay? But you can't just go right from that until you have it edited and know that the notes are there, so AutoTune's going to respond the correct way, because it can only push him to the closest note that's in the scale. Like, it's a dumb process. You know, it's just like, well, he's closest to this, so okay, we'll push him here. Well, that was vibrato. I didn't want you going, you know, over everything. So let's go through by hand and clean it up first. And a lot of times, you may be able to go through and not even really touch anything, and just go through with, like, say, Waves Tune, or if you put in a second, like, you know, graphical mode AutoTune, running into a, you know, real time one. You can go through and just kind of grab the blobs and just fix the bad notes and let the other one do it. You know, if you don't have a lot of time too. Like a lot of times once again, when using, when doing like, you know, what I consider like pop rap, you know, like AutoTune rap, yeah, absolutely. I want the AutoTune running because that's the sound, but I'll absolutely throw in a hand tune, you know, and while we're listening back to the verse, it's analyzing, and I'm just grabbing any notes that I need to and just tucking them in real quick. AutoTune's still doing all the heavy lifting, but I'm just setting it up so AutoTune can do a better job and a more accurate job. That's just a fast and just easy way to work, and you kind of get the best of both worlds. So that is why that's why we use Waves Tune and AutoTune live. Because AutoTune gives us the sound and a particular feel and vibe, as well as running in real time. And Waves Tune is actually what does the heavy lifting when we're doing like real pitch stuff. Yeah, so that's a kind of a basic run through on that. I mean, when you get into, one thing I will say is that a lot of times when you get into, let's check out some. Oh, like underwater. Oops, come on.
Just to hear from you.
So let's say we take a look at these.
Just to hear from you. Just to hear from you. Just to hear from you.
You can hear where it doesn't know what notes to go to. We can totally go back once again to our lead vocal now because we've got it all tuned up. And let's check this out right here. Let's turn you on. So even if you're going for a hard AutoTune sound,
until your love reached down, picked me up from the ground, and shined the light on my feet.
like it almost is starting to sound like funk, okay? Because you're getting the sound, but you're not getting like any of those like weird AutoTune freakouts. So, like, yeah, like you can push this into other effect territory. So it doesn't just have to be AutoTune, you know? It's like, you know, let's take, I guess the other thing that you should always do with these is that, okay, I've got the Waves tunes done and I like them. I'm going to come up, right click, commit up to this insert. Add selection, let's hide and make an active. So they're just done. I've got the tracks hidden and pushed off to the side if I need them.
Can you only do that in 12?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And if you're not subscribed, just get a subscription. The days of upgrading and stuff are over.
Yeah.
Like that ship has sailed. But you'd be like, and once you have your stuff like really, really tight, then you can come in and do the fun stuff where it's like, okay, let's, I don't know, what happens if we, octave underneath that.
From afar, until your love reached down, picked me up from the ground, and shined the light on my feet.
Okay, but let's say because we've got like this super tight.
From afar, until your love reached down, picked me up from the ground, and shined the light on my feet.
Yeah, but we can totally go in and start doing all sorts of crazy stuff like that. Because the pitch is so locked in, and a lot of times when you try to do like other effects and things like that, especially on singing, if your pitch isn't locked in, it just becomes a big garble.
Until your love reached down, picked me up from the ground, and shined a light on my feet. Until your love reached down, picked me up from the ground, and shined a light on my feet.
So
Until your love reached down, picked me up from the ground.
If I tried to do that and AutoTune was running in real time, it would be running in real time in both tracks. What's the chance that it would be tuning them exactly the same? And I tried to do the same effect, it would fall apart because it wasn't working off the exact same audio with the exact same pitch on it, okay? So this is why you want to print your tuning. So even if you're doing hard tuning effects, print it. Print it before you start messing with the audio and doing more stuff to it. It just opens up a whole world of possibilities. Like you listen to that vocal and you're like, once it's in, like the second that it's all tuned, you're like, wow, mixing this just became really easy. Okay, because it just sits in the same spot, and you're like, wow, it has all this extra impact and emotion to it, and you're not messing with it as much. You just edited it and made sure that it just sounded good. It's a good performance, just let it speak for itself. Before reaching for compressors, EQs, reverbs, And even then, a lot of times, then you're like, oh, well, I could do cool effects and just put this in on certain words now, and because then you hear it in a new way now that it sounds good and has more impact. So yeah, pitch correction can make a world of difference, not just to the performance, but also how we perceive it and the ideas that come from it. So yeah, at this point, that's.
It's 100% pop.
Okay. But once again, this, maybe this is right for a track. Maybe it's not right for a track. If you go back and you. I mean, I would say that more often than not, in my experience, that is kind of what a lot of people are listening for. But if a lot of artists, if they're in the room when you're pushing it that direction and cleaning up the pitch, you may get blowback. But typically, by the time that people get to their car and listen to it, they have no idea and don't hear it, and they're just like, "Oh, it sounds amazing." Of course, that's how I sound, And the thing is that's okay. That's the goal, So.
Wandering all alone in the shadows, no hope to be found.
Okay, once again, so that's where we started from.
Wandering all alone in the shadows.
Okay, just everything about that is just clearer. It's the exact same compressors and EQs running on everything. Okay, it's only the pitch that's been edited. Okay, so don't think of pitch as just this like ancillary thing that you just kind of do. Like, it's really important. Okay, so so definitely don't shirk that. And if you're working with an artist that's doing it, it's like, yep. If you're singing, sorry, it takes a lot more time than if you're just doing a mixtape track. If you wanna scrap this and just drop a quick 16, cool. It'll be a lot faster to mix.
Yeah.
But if you're singing, it's just gonna take longer. So, yes. Anybody have any questions, thoughts?
Nah, I don't. But I have been hearing something more. Like, it's just been like saving my ass. Because it's like you said, like you put the AutoTune on, and then especially like with rap, it'd be moments where it just kind of freak out or whatever, and then it look like you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, part of that is having confidence in your tools and confidence to be able to say like, no, this is a performance thing. There's definitely times where people are like, oh no, like that's that's not the AutoTune. I want that other AutoTune. No, there's one. They're like, no, I need this artist's AutoTune. Just use their set. Yeah. It's like no, actually this is AutoTune and it's your performance.
Yeah.
You on a mic into this should sound in the ballpark. There is no magic thing to it, especially if you're using it for an effect. EFX, the AutoTune EFX, those are cool. You can get a quick effect out of it. It's not the same sound as AutoTune 5, AutoTune Live. Like, that's really the sound. Mm-hmm. But it's in the ballpark, and it runs real time and uses a hell of a lot less CPU than regular AutoTune. Especially AutoTune Live, you do need to have a pretty beefy CPU if you're running a bunch of them, because they run in real time, so they take a lot more power. Universal Audio does have their AutoTune real time that you can run. You just you don't want to print it, obviously, when you're tracking with it.
Yeah.
But you do have that. You can't run a ton. It's not super efficient on their platform either. I think you only run 4 DSP chip or something like that. But, but knowing what you can push, and as the more that you take time to edit and hand tune stuff, the better you are at working with someone in real time, because then you start building the confidence of, I know what I can fix and I know what I can't. So when you're working with a singer and they have a really good take and that one note or that one part was out and just doesn't feel right, you can be like, you know what, no, we got it, because I know what I can do with this. And a lot of times if I'm working with a singer, I have a track that we're comping to, that once we're like, yeah, we like that take, and I drop it down, it's already got a waves tune on it, and it analyzes, and it's like right there. So if I'm working on someone that we're really working phrase by phrase, I'm basically tuning in real time behind them. So by the time they step out of the booth, like, yes, we got it. I know we got it, and it's a take that we're all comfortable with, and you listen to it, because if we hear anything, or if they hear, like, oh, that part sounds a little auto-tuned, cool, get back on the mic, we're tracking it again right now. You know, sometimes we do that, and I've tuned it, and then they hear it, and they hear everything back together, and they go back in and spit it with that as a reference track, and they perform it so much better. You can totally use not just hand tuning, but even auto-tune itself as a performance crutch. Actually, one other way that we didn't talk about using auto-tune that's actually really, really powerful, especially in group vocals and things like that, especially when you're under a time crunch, is from the audio suite. It kind of blows my mind that people don't really think of using auto-tune from the audio suite. But what if I had a stack of 5 vocals singing the same note, and they, like, some of them hit the note, some of them were half step lower, things like that? Well, what if I could come into that note and I could be like, okay, you know, this was supposed to be an F. I'm gonna go create individual files clip by clip, grab just the note, normally a little bit more than I need, render, and then go back in and just be like, okay, actually it was just supposed to be that one, and you know, that one there, you know, and now I just tuned that one note across all of them. And if it's bad, I can just pull the region back. I think the term that we coined for it is like, was it tuning by committee? No, it's not tuning by committee. I forget. It's been a while. It's from years ago.
Until your love reached down, pick me up from the.
No, I grabbed an F and the song's an E, so that was not a smart move. But oh, and I also didn't set the scale detune, so that's all types of screwed up. But that's another really powerful way to use it. Let's see.
Never thought of doing that.
I use that a lot, especially when an artist is having issues getting a performance or hearing a note. Harmonies are huge, especially for hand tuning, because I can take that lead and I can rip those notes to be whatever I want. Yeah, they're gonna sound super digital and super fake, but I can make him sing whatever notes I want. So if we're having issues finding a harmony or they're just not hearing it, cool, I'll just copy that, I'll duplicate that track, throw a waves tune on it, make it sing the notes that I want it to sing, and then just mute the lead and be like, here, sing this. So they hear the harmony, and then they sing it for real, and you're like, okay, cool, I got it, you know? There's all sorts of...
Right.
Like, there's all sorts of ways that you can be using this in real time during a session to get better takes from the artist as well. Like, some artists, they don't really start hitting their intervals and their pitch until you run a little bit of auto-tune on them. Like I'd say I'm about 50-50 on artists I track with auto-tune on them, even like real singers.
Yeah.
Some people really like it. Some people it screws up. Some people really like hearing a corrected pitch in one headphone and then a natural in another because they have a headphone off. And that would screw me up royally. But I mean, it's different strokes for different folks.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't care if you got to do a handstand, you know, gargling a bottle of water somehow. If that gets the take, let's do it, you know? Except for sitting down. I give artists a lot of crap if they want to sit down.
Like sit down and record?
And record, especially sing. They're like, oh, well, I just feel so much more intimate. I'm like, yeah, you also don't have any air. You can't really sing when you're sitting down and crouch because you don't have access to your diaphragm.
Right.
You need, you know, so when you do that, then you also only sing from up here. You aren't singing and resonating through your chest. You're only using like 2/3 of your instrument. You know, we evolved a certain way. You know, there are reasons that we breathe like this and should be doing this. You know,
Yeah.
So, anyways, yeah. So,
I can't believe people really want to record sitting down.
it's about vibe.
I did
and feel.
before.
I mean, the thing is, it's like, yeah, but I have worked with artists that I'm like, yeah, we're having to punch in every 2 bars because you have no breath, but if that gets a better take, hell yeah, you know, all about it. You know, so yeah. So, anybody else got any questions, thoughts?
I still thought that was kind of a cool effect.
The octaver?
Yeah.
Well, what that is an octave down with correct formants. That's the formants of the voice being regular, but it being an octave underneath. It's really useful when a singer says that they want to have their voice screwed, because you're like, well, if I screw your voice, now you're singing different notes. Like if I just pitch shifted you down 5, now you're singing in a different key. If you want to do it, you can pitch up the beat like 5, have them record those notes to the beat shifted up 5, so when you pitch shift them down, they're back in key. You can also do that, but that takes a few minutes and kind of screws someone up. Totally done. It sounds awesome. It sounds really cool. Because all of a sudden they're singing like the same notes, but their voice just becomes screwed all of a sudden. But you got to pop it up 5 or 6 steps, like literally pitch shift the beat up, record it, tune it, and then pitch it down. You can do that as well.
It's crazy.
Yeah, you got to get creative sometimes. You know.
Yeah,
Failure is not an option.
So could you like chop and screw like using automation?
Well, maybe not the chop stuff because you actually want to be like stuttering back and forth. But I mean, you can. So when you actually use like stuff like the typical pitch plugins, one thing you gotta be careful of is the timing doesn't actually stay exactly the same. Now everyone's kind of used to the sound, especially from the legacy pitch shift in Pro Tools. Now people notice you have time shift, you have pitch shift, and then you have legacy pitch shift. Legacy pitch shift is like the one from like old school like Pro Tools going back like 6 and 7, because when Screw started, like that's what everybody was using. You know, and there's a sound, and it technically sounds crappy, but that's also the sound.
Right.
You know, like that plugin is an iconic
So
sound.
it's good.
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes it's like a D-verb. You're like, yeah, that's just right. The D-verb. It's been around forever, and you know, so why fight it? You know, verify. You know, like it's almost trite at this point, but you're like, yeah, that's a part of music. You know, so. So I mean, you could, but it's I wouldn't recommend automating screw parts. I'd print them, audio sweep them, because you also want to it burns a ton of latency and all sorts of other stuff. And you may, after doing pitch shifting, you may also want to take it, retime the words, depending on how much they shifted. So
Yeah, it makes a lot more sense to do. Not think about it.
if when in doubt, print what you're doing.
I've been printing a lot lately.
It makes you commit to ideas, which means you get more stuff done.
Right.
And also, it saves resources, a smoother workflow.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's more reliable, you know. So yeah, and in Pro Tools 12, it's really, 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 really easy to print stuff.
I mean, I got it on my laptop, but I just don't have it at the studio. So
Yeah.
so it's only when I'm doing small stuff.
Yeah, no, you should totally do it. Track freeze and committing tracks is awesome. So, all right, guys. Well, I think that's gonna do it for today. The wide world of pitch shifting.